Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you the top 10 most insane Ark teams because I just love them so much. So in at the number 10 spot I've decided to put the Astradelphus, as I find this is just a really effective traveller to get around the map, and I really do like it for all of its element of speed. It really does have a lot going for it in that aspect. As you know, a creature like this and a Tropognathus, that's another creature which I quite like, following the a similar niche to this creature, because they both travel with insane speed. But I just prefer the Astradelphus just from an ability perspective, and getting element is so easy on a map like Gen 2. It really isn't that expensive to do, and I just love the creature. And I also find the tame methods a little bit simpler as well. I know it's not the easiest out there, but I don't really like to chain bowler the Tropognathus. It's just a little bit of a pain in my opinion what you sort of have to do. I think you have to cast bolt at it. It's not as simple just trank out. So in that regard I do prefer the tame methods of the Astradelphus, which is usually why I go for it instead. Yeah, it settles on a later level and technically it runs on more expensive things, but I find it attacks very effectively and it travels at the speed of just insane speed, really. Coming up next on the list we have got the Rhinognatha, and I really do love this as a creature. It just has so much capability when it comes to everything. It can pick up a huge variety of mounts that you'll find across the map, from Rexes to Parasauritheriums and creatures like that. It's honestly insane what this can do in that department. You really wouldn't expect it, especially from a creature of this size, because there are some bigger flyers out there that still can't carry as much as this thing. Although maybe not my favorite tame, as it seems a little bit unbalanced in my opinion, I still really do love this thing, and it is, although an insane one, maybe not quite the one for me, which is why it's only going higher on the list. But I still really do like this creature. I don't want to be like, oh well, I don't really like this creature at all, because that just simply wouldn't be the truth. I really like this creature for all the elements that it offers, especially in its traveling capabilities. Its weight is great, its damage dealing is great too, and I really do attribute it for that. It does a very great job of it, and generally it is just a great mount to have around, and the tame method isn't too difficult. Coming up next I've decided to put the Theory, as this really is the most insane fiber gatherer out there for me. I love the fiber gathering that this creature offers, and of course its saddle was unlocked at level 69.
Nice.
On top of all of that too, it is a great combat mount, and it doesn't just gather fiber as well. It is great at wood and thatch, and also any kind of natural material that you'd find of creatures like chitin, keratin, hide, and any sort of meat, as it can actually gather those, which can't be said about quite a lot of herbivores in the game. Obviously the moss chops is a great shout as well, but I feel like this is an upgraded one, although the organic poly farming isn't quite as good as on one of those. But I really do like this creature, especially if you're going for the dragon on the island as well. Strongly recommend these things, as the dragon has a particular disadvantage to herbivores, as it deals a lot of damage to carnivores with its fire breath attack, but not to those herbivores out there. In at number 7 I simply have to put the Crystal Wyvern, as I really do find this a very effective mount, and especially considering how easy it is to get this thing, at least for me, I really do think it deserves a spot. Yes, it is behind a level 60 cap, and you do need to knock out one of these Crystal Wyverns to get the Primal Crystal, but with a net gun it is ridiculously simple, and with a note run that level 60 is no problem whatsoever, unless you're playing on official. But I'm not one of those official players, and I think most people out there aren't really playing on official. Still like a little bit of a grind, probably about 2.5x is as high as I'll really go, which is basically just default single player settings. It really is not too difficult to get this tame, and you get that full Wyvern experience with, in my opinion, better elemental abilities, which is why I really like this as an Ark creature. I find the Blood Crystal Wyvern is a favourite of mine. That ability that it has is just so much nicer than any fire breath or lightning breath or poison or ice or anything like that. And I've also heard the embers are quite popular among loads of you in the comments below as well, and that is a very splendid one too. Of course this is a tropical one here because it sort of looks the most crystally. I think it's the nicest for the B-roll. Coming in next we have got the Bloodstalker, and this is my all-time favourite underwater travel mount. I really haven't found anything better to do this same job. I just find it does just such a good job for what it is in terms of underwater travel. It is my favourite out there, and of course it is just a great travel mount all round too. But why is it so good underwater? Well, firstly, it can skate along the top of that, which is really just going to benefit it generally if it's trying to get out of some very sticky and dangerous situations. You can see all the aggros of the creatures, very nice in a not very visible environment such as the deep ocean, because really you can't really see down there at all. If you also have the scuba mask on, that kind of limits your field of view more than you'd probably want. And they actually deal a pretty reasonable amount of damage and are very mobile and sort of acrobatic in a way in the water. Same as on land too, I find they really do work effectively for land travel as well. That is sort of what they're more designed to do, but they definitely were designed with the underwater biome in mind, and it's the only real travel mount out there on Genesis Part 1, so considering there was an ocean biome on it, it really was made for all of those maps, and that's why it's such a good underwater traveller. In at number 5, I've decided to put the Baryonyx, as I really do find this an effective caving mount, and it's insane how easily you can get this creature, and also just generally how early on. I really have no idea when the saddle is actually unlocked for this thing, but I'm confident pre-level like 50 or at least pre-level 60 definitely. For sure, with a note run you can easily get up to the level of this thing in, you know, a matter of like maybe half an hour even, or less than that. Note runs are really OP. And then you can head to the swamp biome. I've heard on ASA you can also just head to any rivers because the spawns are a little bit bugged. I don't know if that's intentional or not on the island, and you can find them there. But I would go for the swamp biome just as a general. And if you can find one on the outskirts too that's a high level, that is really going to benefit you. And if you can find one just in a random river somewhere, that is also generally just going to benefit you. They're great cavers because of their size and the fact that they are very mobile. They can jump around and they can deal quite a heck of a lot of damage, and their health is obviously good enough to withstand all of the creatures that you'll find in the cave. They're also great as an underwater caving mount too, due to their great swimming abilities and that stun attack, which they of course have, which can stun creatures up to the size of a Megalodon. Honestly, great tames, and if you haven't tamed one already, it's a must-have. Coming in next, we have got the Reaper, and really, would it be a list like this? Sorry, I don't know why I'm confused with that word for a second. Without the Reaper actually being on here, the king of Ab. There really is little better than it in terms of integrating itself into a map so well, and just with such a crazy cool design that I think we all really do know and love. It is stood the test of time for sure, and I'm still using these things quite frequently, even on maps that aren't Ab, because they are just insane killers of so many things. It's like the Giga on steroids essentially. The Crocodonsaurus is a great shout too, but I'm still really enjoying this thing, and I have been really enjoying this thing ever since it came out. I've only really tamed it on Ab as well, although I have done a bit on Gen 2 if I want to just get one quickly, and also if I want an R Reaper, then I'll use that Rajcock method that he has. It's a really great video if you haven't checked it out already, and if you want a Reaper easily, I would recommend that. But if you never tamed one before, go on Ab and tame one the original way, like we always do it back in the day. It is far more rewarding in my opinion, and then once you get one you feel like the absolute king of the world. Their mold design is insane. They're basically just a xenomorph from Aliens, and yeah, they are really, really cool. In number 3, I simply have to put the RG, as this is just such an effective mount for all things metal gathering. And although it's maybe sort of seems a little bit weird to put it above the Reaper, but honestly this creature has done a lot for me, and it is insane. Again, just this creature is so great. Its saddle was unlocked in the mid 60s. I don't think it's quite that perfect 69, it might be like 68 or something, just out of that perfect range of course. And they are great flyers and great resource transporters, you could say. With their insane weight reduction on metal, crystal, and obsidian, it's 50% at least. I'm pretty sure it's 50%, but I might have to check on that. But again, confident with that. They can pick up a wealth of creatures too. With an Anki and a Dodix, you really can farm like any resource that a pick or hatchet could farm. It's sort of insane really what you can get out of the use case of these things. They can also pick a secondary creature up in their beak. Their saddle acts as portal smithy, so if you've gone caving and an arthro's maybe broken your armor, as long as you've got some metal inside of this thing, you can repair your armor and go to the next cave, and you don't even have to go back to your base. At least that's what I do when I do caving. That's just the thing I do, I guess. The regen buff, which they also have, always does come in handy in my opinion. If you are too low, then you could simply kill something like a Dodo or a Listro, and boom, you eat that thing and you get so much regen. It is honestly a godsend. In at number 2, we have got the Maywing. This is really my favourite traveller out there, and honestly insane that its saddle is unlocked at level 18. You really can't find anything better than this at the level that you're getting it at, and really just better than it in general across the whole game, which really does home in the fact that the saddle was unlocked at level 18. It's insane. I would get to a level of where you can get some signs and obviously trank arrows, which is level 21 for those, so be about level 21. I'm not sure actually when these signs are unlocked, but either way, getting there is very simple, and the taming method is very simple. Use a couple of signs, I think like 3 should suffice to trap it in an area and it won't be able to fly out of them, and trank it out, as long as you build the trap right, of course, otherwise it will be able to get out of it. So make sure they're reasonably close together and then it can't walk out of that area. You're going to have to act quite quickly as well, but it really isn't too difficult, at least from what I found. And then you've got yourself a Maywing like that, boom. You can even start with a really high level, they don't take too many turns to knock out. You've got yourself the best, like fastest pretty much travel mount in the game. They also act as a portable feeding trough, they can gather berries too, and are reasonable swimmers as well, so they really do have a lot going for them. Insane their saddle was unlocked at level 18. It's honestly amazing. And in number 1, we've got the Deinonychus. This really does have to top my list. I can't really think of anything that is more insane than this creature, just for all of my general needs. While yes, maybe it doesn't fulfill those underwater needs, the Shadowmane would be a good shout there. I'll give it a brief honorable mention. Don't want any comments about I didn't include the Shadowmane on the list. It gets an honorable mention here, okay? Maybe it should have been on the list, in my opinion, in a way, but you know, it's being left out because I think all these creatures are more valuable to me, at least at the moment. The Deinonychus though really is a king when it comes to boss fights, able to deal bleed damage to them as well by just grappling onto them, like you can see I'm doing to that Bronto there, and just absolutely shredding them. Especially considering they have the pack buff on top of this too, there really is nothing which can go wrong. The boss fights will take barely any time whatsoever, unless there's a certain minigame to it, like the Gen 1 boss fight, which might not be the best fight to bring these things in, as their health can sometimes be not the best for the longer fights. But as long as you have some health mutations on these things, I think you should be fine, and I've done it with Dines before, so it is definitely very possible. That is on Alpha as well, I should specify, not just the puny Gamma fight, but all the way up to the Alpha. I did all of them. I've also done the Gamma fight with Carnos as well, but I find they don't really work as well when you get up into the higher tiers of that boss. You don't want to be using these things for the Moda, but that's just generally obvious, isn't it? They're great parkour gods too, and they take no fall damage. How you tame one, you go to the Chalk Cliffs biome and you steal an egg out of a Dine nest, and then boom, you've got yourself that Dine baby. Once you hatched it, then you're going to raise it. If you get a good breeding pair, you're all set. The top 10 most creative Ark tames. In at number 10, we have got the Crystal Wyvern, and I really do like this creature, and I find, especially when it comes to its elemental abilities, it is on that creative side. While the normal wyverns are still very good in my opinion, and I still very much like them as creatures, I really enjoy what the wyverns bring to the scene. These creatures are fast and agile, and especially when coming to the Crystal Wyverns, their elemental abilities are not something to be reckoned with. They really do have a lot going for them in that aspect. They're just so much cooler in a way than, oh, this creature simply just breathes fire or ice or poison, which is still cool, but having the ability to suck the life out of enemies, and you know, maybe shooting water you might say isn't the coolest thing, but still, that Blood Crystal Wyvern is the favourite of mine. I love the ability that it gives off. And from model design as well, these things are all looking way nicer. And the tame method, in my opinion, is a little bit more interesting. Well, yes, it's fun and enjoyable to go down into the depths of the Wyvern trenches and find whatever you can salvage from there. You're really not going to get the same enjoyment, at least I don't get the same enjoyment from doing the passive tame with this creature, as I find that to be much more enjoyable from my perspective. In at number 9, we have got the Mantis, and come on, this creature does deserve to be here. With its huge variety of abilities, it deserves to make the list, in my opinion. And although maybe it's not the most popular one, which is why I've moved it back a bit, because I do take your accounts and thoughts a little bit into consideration in these lists, because after all, you are the community that this channel sort of built upon, and I do like to kind of, you know, call out, shout out and whatever, and sort of take your opinions into consideration when making my list as well, as I kind of want to make these be lists that you like as well as I agree with too. I'm not going to go with something that I completely don't agree with, but, you know, maybe a little bit of a mix and match, a little bit of compromising. But the Mantis for me is definitely one of mine from my mind. I love going around and just shredding through many Ovis on Ragnarok and getting tons of muscle on this thing. They're great for metal gathering as well. You can get picks on this thing. The only thing you really do have to be careful about in some sense is durability does drain it much faster on a Mantis than really just you using it by hand, but it's so much more fun and so much more enjoyable. You might as well give it a go, and they're not the hardest tames in the world. They can take a little bit of elbow grease, but it shouldn't be too bad. Coming up next, we have got the Andrewsarchus, and I really just find as a concept this creature is quite an enjoyable one, from just its very creative model design, really adding a lot to it, literally having a gun on the top of its saddle. Also, I find the way that it moves is pretty creative and enjoyable as well. I like this creature in a lot of ways more than something like the Thylot or the Sabertooth, because it just seems to bring a lot more to the table. Again, that mobility on this creature is purely insane, and I can't get round the pure insanity of just how much I love a creature like this. It really does go hand in hand with my playing style, and the gun on the top is just a nice neat extra that I just really enjoy. In at number 7 we've got the Ranignatha. Come on, these are sort of the kings of the island as a map, and they're sort of unbeaten in that aspect. These creatures really do a lot in terms of traveling, at least for me, and especially considering you can pick up things like vaults and just get immense amounts of resources across the map with absolute ease. And obviously you can carry Rexes and Parazoitherians around the map like there is no tomorrow. It's obvious why these things are going to be useful, and although while their weight isn't the best off of the bat, but considering again you can pick up those safes, that you're going to have no issue, as that does not add weight to the creature, at least as far as I'm concerned it doesn't. That's kind of a cheat really, so you don't really need an insanely high weight stat, but you do need a vault, which can take a little bit, but trust me, it's not too bad. And at the stage you're going to be taming one of these things, I think that's sort of just going to be the norm. Like, come on, a creature like this is going to be unlocked in the very late game, at least in terms of the saddle level, and taming one is probably going to be even after that. The tame method isn't too dissimilar to the Reaper, which isn't actually on the rest of this list, but I'll give it a brief honourable mention here, as I do think the Reaper is a very nice one on Aberration, and it does add a lot to the map, but not maybe the most creative, because essentially is sort of a copy of the Xenomorph aliens, which is why I had a little bit of deterrence in putting it on the list. But the Ranignatha definitely does need to be here. It's essentially a completely new creation from Wildcards, and I really do like what they've done with the creature. It's cool, it looks amazing, and functionally it truly is a fantastic one, which you should not underestimate. Continuing on, we have got the gas bags. This is sort of a creature like no other, at least in my opinion. These things are peak when it comes to Ark, at least in my opinion. They're so cute in terms of their model design, and they really hit hard when it comes to travel. They can do quite a decent amount, which maybe you wouldn't expect from a creature like this. But the fact is, they just use oxygen as opposed to stamina, just, you know, to fly around the place. This also does add defense to the creature as well, so that could come in potential use. And while they're not fighters, and sometimes maybe not the most mobile, no saddle is actually required to ride a creature like this, and I find it really isn't that bad in terms of mobility, and you can still get around, and their incredible weight is extremely useful in something like this, for, you know, generally getting around and carrying lots of resources for you. You're not going to need a safe like you will on the Ranignatha, but this is a creature which you'll be taming and unlocking in terms of saddle way earlier than the Ranignatha. It's lower grade in terms of creature, but I actually sort of prefer it as a tame, but that's just my general preferences coming out there. I really do like the gas bags. I think it's cute, it's cool, and it's sort of something that's never been done before, and nothing has ever been done like it afterwards, and it still stands to this day as a very creative art creature. Coming in at number 5, we have got the Astradelphis, and this really is one of those creatures where there's sort of nothing that really compares to it apart from the Troponatus. Again, that sort of gets another honourable mention here, as they do kind of tie hand in hand as creatures, but essentially they are really just fast beasts. And the Astrodelphis does just literally mean space whale, but no, sorry, space dolphin. Astrocetus is space whale. This is the dolphin and not the whale. But I really like the design that has gone on with this creature. And the Troponatus isn't as creative as it was actually just a creature that came out in Ark, but the abilities that it has around it are inherently creative. But this creature still takes a list for me, as it is a completely new idea from Wildcard. Following on from the Astrocetus, of course, it takes a lot of inspiration from it, but it's that kind of lighter variant in a way. It travels with a lot more speed and grace than the Astrocetus, and also, you know, just purely in terms of design and looks, again, I love it. And the Astrocetus is really cool as well. That's quite an interesting creative tame, but sadly that creature is not making the list. Continuing on, we've got the Shadow Mane, and come on, a creature like this really does deserve to be on the list, at least in my opinion. It's a creature which is just so jam-packed full of abilities, it deserves to be here in my opinion. Obviously, originally coming out on Gen 2, it really did shock many players when it came out, and it was something so creative. It also was like the highlight of the Gen 2 trailer, so it's gotta be on this list for its creativeness. I love it as a creature. Its mobility is something which you really don't see on a lot of creatures. The fact that it also can charge up its damage and attack with just a big massive slash on top of having the hydration buff and the bleed ability, that works even more effectively on a creature like this, especially considering its size and the fact that it doesn't need a saddle. It's just simply, once you turn into one, go ahead and just go out there and battle, really, because they are very decent at it. The great swimmers too, but considering their codename Lionfish Lion, makes sense. The only disappointing thing about these creatures is, you know, they've been nerfed since release, but still great, and their tame method is just so annoying. In number 3, we have got the Velonosaur, and this is just one of those creatures where I think it needs to be on the list for me. Nothing has been like the Velonosaur, just in any sense. Before it and after it, nothing really can compete with it in that sense. There is nothing like it. I just love this creature and the ability that it offers, where it just shoots its spines from its body into enemies and it can shake them off to them as well. It's something which you don't see on Ark creatures, and you haven't seen on Ark creatures since, you know, this thing actually released. Obviously the Velonosaur is a good upgrade to it, spawning on Gen 2, and I love that creature too, but it is the same one at the end of the day, and that shows its creativeness. Nothing is like it, and it works really well and effectively. Maybe not at the range that I'm showing you here, but still I think it stands, and at longer ranges or mid ranges, which is probably where you're going to be using this thing the most, it really does work effectively to ping off those enemies. It's sort of like your own personal turret, and while you could use turrets, it just seems like a more enjoyable way to use it like this, to have a creature like this to use as a turret. I wouldn't use it in a PvP scenario like a turret, but still, for going around by yourself, you can ping off enemies from afar before they even get to you. At number 2, we have got the Maywing, and this creature is one where I just love it. Okay, it's so good at traveling, and its model design is fantastic. It works really well as a creative creature. Would you expect a giant gliding flying platypus from Genesis Part 2? Not really, no, but that's what you're going to get. And at level 18 you unlock the saddle for this thing. It's an absolute cheat code when it comes to travel. Actually, it's really innovated the gliding space. It's just so good at doing its job, at least in my opinion. While the Rock Drake is another great addition to this, I find the Maywing does this job far better than any Rock Drake ever could, and you know, of course, for that reason, that's why I'm putting the Maywing on the list and not any kind of Rock Drake. You should have no issue flying around with something like this, maybe unless you're going up a steep vertical wall. But even if you're in the ocean, you're still going to be fine with a creature like this, as they're pretty decent swimmers, and they can also skate along the top of the water too, which you might not find on some other Ark creatures. They're great for a portable feeding trough as well, which you can probably tell from that slightly disturbing animation which is on the screen, and they also gather berries too. What's not to like? And in number 1, we have got the Bloodstalker. In my opinion, this is the most creative thing that Wildcard has ever done. It is a huge favourite of mine, and I love how this was a creature essentially just designed to work on one whole map and be the one sole creature to work on that map. It is a beast at traversing Gen 1, and since it's the only real effective travel mount on the map, it really has been designed for any kind of lava biome, water biome, bog biome, or ice biome. Just basically everything, okay? The Bloodstalker can do everything, and while it can't walk in lava like a Magmasaur, it certainly is a great swimmer, and it's my favourite underwater tame, actually. If you ever checked out my underwater tames video, I'll leave a card up there, actually, if you want to go watch that, if I remember to leave a card up there. That is honestly it's a great creature for it, okay? And also quite like the video as well. I like what I did on the list there because I agree with it quite a lot. Obviously it is me at the end of the day, but even when you get out of the water, you've still essentially got a Spider-Man as a creature, and you can just go around the place with absolute ease, and you should have no issue with traversing the landscapes. You should just have no issue traversing with a creature of this skill, in my opinion. And also, if you're running low on health, you can always just nick a bit off another creature. You know, you might as well. They really do stand, in my opinion, for all of that. They are great little critters for travelling around the place, and I find they're so creative in design. And give it up for our patrons, Ekaterina Puchkova and Karina Thorne, Dominic Macy-Juski, sorry about that name, and everyone else that's on this list. All the people I've mentioned are paid members, and if you feel like that's something you want a shout out at the end of the video, go join the Patreon or become a paid YouTube member.